Welcome. I'm Melva Persico. Come with me, meet new people, and share their experiences in this episode of Our Culture to the World. My guest today is Roxanne Benjamin-Hoppie. Please introduce yourself, Roxanne.
Thank you, Melba, and a pleasant good evening to our listening audience. I am Roxanne Benjamin-Hoppie. I am Guyanese by birth, but presently living in the United Kingdom. I am actually speaking to you from my country of birth right now because I'm Asian. Now, I started my career at a very young age, a career which I enjoy. If I live my life again, I will relive this career. So I'm a teacher by profession, and I started at a very young age, as I said before, because I started teaching Sunday school. I was encouraged by my mom to take on such a role, and I have no regret. And then I advanced into secondary, completed my secondary years. I studied on the quarantine of Berbice at a school called Winifred Gaskin Memorial. In my days, it was called Manchester Government Secondary. And from Manchester, I was introduced to a subject called home economics, which I grew to love, and that's the subject I advanced my studies in when I became a teacher, and I became a home economics teacher. I love the practical subject because you can balance theory and practical, and you also are able to showcase things that others have not taught you that you can teach yourself. What do I mean by that? As a home economics teacher, you work with food, you work with fabric, you work with money and other things, which is related in a subject called home economics management. So in food, you can take any food, put them together. You can look at a recipe, but you can modify that recipe and change it. But moving along from home economics, I trained as a teacher in Guyana. I advanced my training at university where I studied a bachelor's degree in home economics, education, home economics. Then I further went on to a postgrad admin in education, and I did a master's degree too in counseling. So I had a full turn in Guyana, after which I migrated to the United Kingdom. You may ask how. My first entry into the United Kingdom was via a scholarship from Guyana that sent me to study ICT in home economics, which is information computer technology in home economics. I returned, that was an IDB funded scholarship. I returned and I served. At that time, I was working at Carnegie School of Home Economics because, as I said, my background was home economics. And then I had a second scholarship which took me to Jamaica, and I did a master's in hospitality and tourism, which allowed me to introduce at Carnegie a hospitality and tourism program, which is now very advanced here in Guyana. So with that said, I think you can have a snapshot of my academic long journey. And as I said, I'm now in the United Kingdom. Whether it's by chance or whether it's by luck, I still teach. I love teaching, and as I said initially, I will do it again if given the opportunity. Thank
Wow,
you.
yes. Thank you, Roxanne. Yes, so you have really told us a lot about you. I mean, what you do as a profession and your journey there. So, Roxanne, now you now reside in the United Kingdom. You had studied there before, and now you live there. So, how come you ended up living in the United Kingdom?
That's a story to be told. Like I said, I studied there. I had my first overseas scholarship in the UK, and it was supported by my mom, who resided in the UK. So when I went off to study, I took my daughter with me, and mom was on hand to assist with childcare because she was only 22 months at the time. So I went off to University of Birmingham to do my study, and my mom resided in London. So I had a traveling to and from um, London to Birmingham, which is London is the largest city in England, and Birmingham is the second largest city. Now, while doing that with a 22-year-old baby, because she was
22
still
month old. Yeah.
22 months old
Right.
baby, she was still nursing and all of that. Um, you started talking about, oh, would you stay in England and work? Some people asked the question. I said, well, I can't because it's a scholarship and I have to return to serve. I'm not one of those persons who thought that you can just run off after doing a scholarship. Anyway, I pursued a course, I completed, and I returned. But what happened is I did not return with my daughter, so my mom kept her. So she was left in London.
Mhm.
And from that, I was vacationing in London frequently.
Mhm.
But just to backtrack, while on that 1 year course, the course was an education course, like it was introducing ICT into home economics. So I had to do placement in schools. And so what the university did was they attached me to schools. So as I got into the schools, different schools, I had about 4 different schools during the period, and I had the opportunity of teaching. At the time, they used to call it home economics, but it has changed. I'll tell you a little more about the name of the subject. I used to be teaching home economics, which of course is a practical subject. And what I had the opportunity of doing was introducing our cuisine from Guyana into the system in the UK. Now, they had their curriculum, but I had the opportunity because when I met the persons I was attached with, they asked me my background. I said, oh, would you mind showing us some of the foods you use in Guyana? So I went to get whatever food was available. Some weren't. I mean, now, because I live there, it's better, but back then in the early 90s, some of our foods from the Caribbean were not available. So what I did was, and this is very important for this culture to the world, I was able to look for ingredients that were similar in
Mhm.
usage in order to integrate into the dishes that I would have shown them. So some of the things I did was our local pepper pot. I showed them our cook up rice. Of course, I've done curry. I showed them roti. And if you think about those ingredients, you can find them, yes, but then some of them there, ones we are accustomed to, we couldn't get. So I had to use and do a little transformation. So coming out of that experience in the system, I realized, oh, the teaching system in the UK is not far different to what what I'm exposed to, and it would be a good opportunity to try. But at the time, I couldn't because I had to return to serve. And then the opportunity came once when my husband decided we can have a go at what the system is. And he was the one who was fortunate to have our first work permit when we did decide to settle. And the system is different there. So one person can have the work permit and the other one can just work, or we say, on the back of. And so as he got the work permit, then I worked on the back of him. And that's how we got into the system. And then one other sweet thing happened for us. It's changed now because we started with the visitor's visa, and you could have transitioned to a work permit.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, and the year we got in, which is 2003, that was the last year that system took place. So we
Wow.
were able to, yeah,
Mhm.
transition, because everyone asked, is it because of your mom you were? No, mom didn't assist us with getting into the system is because we had our British qualification, which is a bonus because I studied there, and my husband also did a master's. So we both had British qualification, and we were able to transition. So that's our
Okay.
story, yeah, of
Wow.
getting
Yes.
in.
Yes. So, you've been living there since 2003.
Yep,
And maybe a little later, we talk a little more about how you did this adaptation with
yep,
ingredients and so on when we get
yep.
a little
Yes,
further
definitely.
along. But now you had visited, as you mentioned, you had studied in the UK, you would visit from time to time, and now you're living there full time.
Yep,
How was that different for you?
yep. Now, we in Guyana know of the proverb that says, "Come see me and come live with me." It's two different
Different thing.
things.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So when you're visiting, you go with your own money and you're staying at, well, of course, the good thing for me, mom was there. And, you would go out, do your shopping, but you didn't have utility bills to take care of. You didn't have warm clothing to take care of because parents will assist you with all those things.
Yeah.
So when we arrived, as we decided, we agreed as a family that we were going to go. So we took whatever finance we had. So the first 5 months we stayed with mom, and things were fine, but because you're accustomed to live on your own, there's some things you do different to the other person.
Mhm.
It would be simple things like you wake up at a certain time, you tidy up your bed, you go off, you do your food preparation, and then for me, sometimes I go back to bed. But when you're with persons and others in the house, they don't do things like you do. So I used to feel a bit uncomfortable, like, oh, at 10:30 she's back in her bed. What is wrong with her? Is she okay? Those kinds of things. That's just a little example. Um, the other things you have is, you go out, you probably want to stay out a little late, and then, you have your parents who are mature in age, and then you have to come and press the doorbell because they put on the safety lock, and and you feel uncomfortable.
Right.
So, yeah, but I mean, it was not bad uncomfortable. My mom never complained, but I was feeling uncomfortable because, you just want to get that free movement and the way you do things.
Right, exactly.
So yeah, so after 6 months, because as I said, we got our work permit sorted within the first 3 weeks, and we were able to gain ourselves enough money so that we can move on to our own place. So we moved, and but in the move, we were hoping that our daughter would have stayed, but she didn't. She moved with us too.
Mhm.
Yeah, yes, and so we moved into our first flat as a family after 5 months. So we arrived there in August of 2023, and I think it was somewhere around October, November, we moved into
Mhm.
our one place. So that was, of course, a culture shock because by then now you have to start looking at your budget and how much you earn and what you have to pay for your rent. You're going to pay your gas bill, your electric bill, your food shopping, your phone bill, and all the other overhead that comes with it. But what was good for us, because both of us were educators, we both taught, and as a teacher, the salary was relatively okay
Mhm.
for us to manage with. So we did not have the struggle as, sometimes people start off as unskilled labor. So we went
Right.
straight into our profession. And so we were remunerated. Um, the system now is if you don't have a British qualification, you have to upgrade your teacher's qualification to the British one.
Mhm.
But because we both had degrees from the UK, we had to do what they call overseas trained teacher program, which is you're on the job, but you just have to prove to them that you can meet a few um, teacher training criteria. They call it the
Okay.
qualified teacher criteria. And it was simple things. Um, Parents send you a complimentary thank you for something you would have done. You put that in a folder and you tick the box to say that you had a parent consultation and this is the results of it.
Okay.
Student progress. Um, your students are given a target to achieve, and over the period they have achieved the target or exceed. You show how you would have done it. So the child start at emerging, and you took them all the way to the to a master level, and you show how it was done with a little note signed by your line manager. You put that in. So you met those criteria for a year, and after you would have, the university that the school is attached to award you the qualified, they call it QTS, Qualified Teacher Certificate, or QTS, Qualified Teacher Service,
Okay.
which is the equivalent of a graduate
Okay.
teacher. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So that's how we achieved our our qualified teacher status.
Mhm.
But it's different now. You have to be attached to university. You got to go to classes and all kinds of other
Yes,
things.
everything
But
gets more
things there.
difficult as time
I
goes on, right?
know, I know. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
And the good thing I enjoyed, the school I spent the longest at, I had the opportunity to coach overseas teachers.
Oh,
So yes, so because I got into the system, what the head teacher used to do when teachers come in, they used to attach them to me, which came with additional, we call it management points.
okay.
So you're paid for that, and so I would take them through. This is what you do. This is how you do things. So
Mhm.
I enjoyed that side of it
Right. So
also.
yeah, this kind you were able to mentor them
Yes,
yes, yes,
yes,
that's
yeah.
good. So, you know, you're living in the UK and was, coming from Guyana and so on. Was there anything, did you have any kind of stereotypes that you maybe had heard or thought about people in the United Kingdom and their culture? Now you actually, living full time there and interacting more with them.
Yeah, there was. I mean, there's so much to say on stereotypes. Now, as a teacher, you are expected to mold a nation. I mean, that's I think one of the motto for Guyana.
Right, that's what we say. The Guyana Teachers
The teachers.
Association, Teachers
Yes,
Union, right? We mold the
that's
nation.
it. Yes. So when I arrived in the UK, I went there with mold in the nation, but
Mhm.
I realized that has to be dispelled. You don't mold nation. What you do is you prepare people for the nation. So the young people that comes to us, they didn't have a motto of molding nation. So what they say you do is you ensure that the student is fit for society.
Mhm.
And what that means is they have the basic education, which is the English, maths, and science, because those are core subjects that every student does, completely different to what we do in Guyana. Don't know if it's changed now, but you had to do those. And if you're in a school that is church affiliated, you have to do religious studies and you have to do a mother language. So those five are core subjects. Now, nothing to do with molding a nation. So you are there ensuring that your students, and then from those five, they choose options. So the child who wants to go further into the sciences will make sure they do triple science. This child who wants to go into the finer arts, they will do those creative arts subject, which one of my subject falls there. So I used to fit into the arts as well as I used to fit into the science and also technology. So that was one thing that was different. The other thing that was different for me is, when students, I work with secondary, so 11 year when Guyana setting would be after common entrance. In England, you don't have common entrance. You just pass through the system. You finish in primary and your parents request three schools of your choice and you get your first choice or your second choice or your third choice. So no common entrance takes
Okay.
you. Some schools do a screening system where they group students according to the end of primary exams. So they are graded and then they group them. Some schools don't, they call it mixability, depends on, what the school want as their thing. So you just come in. So that's also was different from us. We know in Guyana, if you do not pass, you fail. So you remain in that grade. But in England, no one failed. You just pass through. So you move from junior, you move from nursery, reception into primary. You spend your 5 years in primary. End of primary, you advance into secondary. You spend your 5 years. We say year 7, year 8, year 9, which year 7 is like Form 1 or grade 1. I don't know how
Right.
they
I
call
think in
it now.
Guyana they use grade now. So they would
Grades
say
now.
what we used to call Form 1 would be like grade 7, grade 8,
Right.
right?
So we are year 7. We say year. Year 7, year 8, year 9, which is like grade 9,
Right.
10, and then 11,
Mhm.
which is GCSE year,
Right.
which is the CXE year
Right.
equivalent. Yeah, so that also was a culture, difference or stereotype and different. The other thing is I did a bit of correction of GCSE papers in Guyana. That was a culture shock. I used to be the most difficult marker in my team because I'm sitting there correcting spelling, grammar, and everything. And whenever it goes up to my leader, she kept saying, "No, Roxanne, we don't mark for that. As long as the concept
The
is there, you
content,
have to,
right? You're
you
grading
give."
for content, not for grammar.
Yeah. So I spent the first 3 years confusing myself, um, because I'm looking into all those details. And so it took me a while. I mean, I eventually got over that. So I think now I'm maybe one of the most lenient marker now. So that also was another bit of, culture
Right, cultural
differences.
difference, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So you're now seeing how things were different, right,
yeah.
depending on the society in which you live.
Dependent Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. I remember saying to my daughter, I said, "Oh, you've passed all these subjects, but if you were in Guyana, you would not have gotten all those subjects." And she said, "Why are you saying that, Mom?" I said, "Because when I look at some of your work, that wouldn't become, CFC wouldn't give you a grade for that. It's so different.
Different system, yes.
Yeah.
Um, and what would you say are aspects of life in the United Kingdom that have had the biggest impact on you?
Okay. Um, what has impacted me in the UK when I think about life as a whole is being able to maintain your family unit. Um, I, if I talk to friends who are in the United States, for example, and they say to you, "Oh, I have to do a second job, or I'm going after my second job." Now, in the UK, you can work your one job and being able to whatever you earn have it with your family or family, and it helps. And I like that bit of it. I was tempted to go to the States at one time, but when I look at where I was being given the offer, and you got to think about each person will have to drive, each person will have to do things individually. So to come together, I felt this might affect family life for me. And so I didn't, take the offer on board because one was, I was going to be in one state and somebody was going to have to be in another state. And I'm like, no, I just want my family together. We are not big, but we want to stay together. And so that was one of the things. And The other thing is, which might sound a little frivolous, but transportation system is very effective.
Mhm.
Very, very effective, whether you use a bus, a train, a tram, or whether you drive. Very, very effective. And it works for starting your day, going to work, returning back from work. You have your connection. You might have to use two or three. Some people use tram, bus, train,
Mhm.
and they are all connected and interlinked. Now, when it comes to food, we have transformed a whole lot. I mentioned earlier in the 90s, there were some food that we couldn't access in the United Kingdom. Now we are a multicultural pot.
Mhm.
Because I live in London, we have all the Caribbean foods now, whether it's out of Pakistan or Kenya or Bangladesh or Costa Rica, whether it's from the Caribbean, we now have access to all. And so that would have added a lot of enrichment to my subject, which is now called food technology, used to be home economics. Why they call it food technology is because it's linked to the design aspect of technology. So
Mhm.
you're not just cooking the food, but you're designing the food. And
Right.
so we do a design process. So I can take two slices of bread, some tuna, some sweet corn, and I can create a sandwich, not just putting the two slices alone together, but I can create a shape
Mhm.
using the bread, and I can decide I'm not going to put the tuna between, I can put it on top of and give it another name. So those are the kinds of
Right, right, right.
creativity that,
Creative. You're
yeah,
creating and
yes,
designing.
designing,
Yes.
that's right. So
Wow,
now it's
nice.
called, yeah. So that
Mhm.
was also another transition, another side of it, because I was in that whole process when I joined the system, because we had to do insets, which is teacher training, to introduce that. And I remember some of the mature ladies that were in the system, they were finding it difficult. Oh, but we can do it like that. Why are they changing it? And I was happy because, as I mentioned, my degree in the UK was how to introduce ICT into home economics. And so that transition I enjoyed a whole lot because I was able to use that qualification and experience to
Mhm.
develop well. And
Yes.
yeah, it also helped me to do some coaching and mentoring also with
Mhm.
other schools. Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah. Right. So, it's something you mentioned, and I just want to go back to it a little bit about transportation. Even though you said it might sound frivolous, I really don't think so, because especially when you live in a big city, even here, I mean, I live in a rural area,
yeah.
but I know there are many people who would tell you that what they like about living in the big cities is
Mm-hmm.
the easy access to public transportation,
Yep.
having a good public transportation system, and it makes life a whole lot easier indeed.
Yeah, it does.
To
Mm-hmm.
know that you can go from here to here and connect and so on,
And so
and
on.
you don't
Mm-hmm.
have to, you know, fight with the traffic
Wonder,
and
traffic,
worry,
yeah, worry around. Mm-hmm.
and if you don't have a vehicle or a reliable
Yeah, in a
vehicle,
cycle.
you
Mm-hmm.
know, the public transportation system
It
works for
is.
you,
Yeah, it
Yes.
is very
So it's very
reliable.
important. It's not frivolous.
Yes.
And yeah,
Yes, very
it
reliable.
would have an impact on you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So you had mentioned earlier that when you were there studying, you were able to share some in terms of food,
Food. Mm-hmm.
aspects of culture related to food, and you had to make some adaptations.
Yes.
What are some adaptations, like you're saying at that time, certain
Yeah.
ingredients weren't available,
Available.
but
Mm-hmm.
what were some of the ingredients that maybe you
Adaptation.
couldn't find, and how did you
Mm-hmm.
deal with that?
Yeah. So I remember when we did, when I showed them our local pepper pot. So we know in pepper pot you use a mixture of meat. So you use beef, some people use pork, we use internal offal, or as we would say, tripe, and
Mhm.
all those different mixture of meat. So this area, the school I was attached to, it was predominantly white area. So they had, steak, and they had, the things they use for their roast. So we would not have found at that time. When I explained to them, I said, oh, we use something called tripe. And they're like, tripe? What's that? So I was able now, at that time, we didn't have Google. So I had to be explaining what it is. And then we discover that it's referred to in their language as offal, right? Which is the internal organ, the kidney, which include kidney and all the other things. And so that was once one bit of change. So I had to say to them, okay, so because we don't have the drive, we're gonna just stick with just having your steak and whatever other cuts of meat you use. And then one of my second school, I met someone who had Jamaican background. And I remember when I shared with her, at the time, we never used to use oxtail in our pepper pot. And then she said, oh, we use oxtail. And I'm like, what's that? Anyway, that's also was, another bit of transition. So then I was able to, at her school, add the oxtail to the cuts of meat. And yes, so that was one thing. And then I remember when I showed them roti, we had difficulty with flour. They only had plain flour and self-raising flour. Now in Guyana, we use plain flour and we add our baking powder to it. So when you're using self-raising flour, you don't necessarily have to put, the baking powder in the flour for the roti mix. So again, that was something that we were able to tweak. And then we discover, now I've moved away from that. I don't use self-raising flour in roti anymore. We use strong bread flour. And you mix it with plain flour. So again, that was also from trial and experience, I think, because the self-raising flour used to make it a bit loose, and it used to all fall apart. But when you use the strong bread flour and the plain flour, and you mix the two with your baking powder, you get a better fusion and a better combination. Now texture, which also had led me into a business. I used to supply roti to a shop. When I perfected the mixture of the two flour for quite a long time. Yeah.
Yes, wonderful. That's good. Yeah. But now, apart from that experience, when you were, when you were studying in those two schools, what other opportunities have you had to share Guyanese culture? Not just, with food or any other thing, any other aspect of our culture. How
Right.
have you been able to share that in the UK?